As you reflect on this past year and prepare for the new year, we've put together a collection of the best of Monday Morning Moments segments from this past year. And we hope it'll encourage you and to think about all of the different topics that we've talked about on this channel. And hopefully it's been useful to you. But I think it's a great segue into the new year. And so we've got different segments. We've put links to all of the different full episodes that relate to these segments as well. So you can go back and go deeper into these segments if something captures your attention or you wanted to go back to that. But I hope you'll like the segments we've put together. And as I was going back through the topics, we've covered a lot of topics on this channel. We talked about purpose a lot. We talked about holding on to our plans loosely. We talked about leadership and what makes great leaders, and also about scheduling, how leaders need to create capacity in their schedule to be able to not take on too many roles, but to give their best to the roles that matter most. We talked about giving feedback and how we need to encourage and dive into somebody's potential to be and make sure that we're giving feedback and giving feedback with the idea of helping them to grow as leaders. We also talked about playing with joy and focus and how great athletes play with joy and focus. And this is applicable in anything. As a leader, I think we need to have focus in the work that we do, but also to enjoy those moments and to enjoy what we do. We then went into 5 keys to a championship mindset, and we did 5 podcasts on that. And that was great because I get to speak about that all the time. But to share just a synopsis of what those keys are and how you can apply them not only in sports, but also in business and life. We rounded out our podcast episodes on purpose, and we did 3, 4, or 5 segments on that and talked about why it's important to define your purpose, what the consequences are of not living out your purpose and understanding what that is and connecting to that. We talked about this quote from a great mentor and friend of mine, Scott Kaufman, that says, life is a series of assignments that gives clarity to our calling and to our purpose along the way. And that we rounded out those podcast episodes on purpose with an interview with my good friend, Gabe Baker. And that was a great segment. It was a longer segment for what we traditionally do on Monday Morning Moments, but we had a great conversation, and Gabe's an incredible person. And he talked about how purpose has played a role in his life and the many things that he's doing. And then we talked about how to have an annual debrief of this past year and some things that go into that and some questions that hopefully will be helpful to you as you reflect on this last year and do a debrief of this last year before you prepare that, maybe the one word that you're going to focus on in the next year, or maybe it's the goals that you're going to focus on for next year as well. So again, links are in the descriptions. Links will be in the videos as you can look into those. And again, we're going to be doing even more interviews, more topics around leadership and performance in sports, business, and life. And I hope you've enjoyed all of these segments. And as you dive into this, that you enjoy reflecting back on maybe some of the podcasts that you've listened to. But also, we'd love your feedback on topics that you want to know more about. And maybe it's something we've done a podcast on, but you want to go deeper in that. Feel free to message me or leave a comment in the channels, whether you're consuming this through audio podcast or also on our YouTube channel. But you can also go to MikeVanHoozer.com and leave a message there about topics that you may want to hear on this podcast. Again, I hope you've had an incredible year. And as you reflect on this past year and look to the new year, I want to encourage you to think about things that you need to dive into more, to lean into more in those roles that are so, so important. And as always, as we've said on many, many times on Monday Morning Moments, to make the most of the moments in your life. And then the third thing is being committed. It's committed to lifelong learning. So being committed to a process of lifelong learning in your life. And I think that the key piece there is that great leaders who are committed to the process of lifelong learning continue to seek out information in that depth of knowledge, even when they feel like they've arrived and even when they feel like they have a mastery of the material. An example in my own life is that early on, I had a passion for leadership, and I've always had that in my life. And as we teach leadership, I still have a quest to learn more about leadership. But early on, I consumed as many books as I could on leadership. I went to hear people talk about leadership. I gathered different insights from different people. Somebody once joked that they were working with me and they said, well, yeah, Mike reads books on leadership all the time, and maybe he'll get it at one point if he reads enough books. But I think that's important that as a leader, whatever that topic or subject matter that you're interested in, that you go deeper in that, even when you feel like you've arrived, and that you're committed to that process of continual growth and knowing that you can continue to grow even when you feel like you're an expert in whatever that might be. And specifically, this zone that we can enter sometimes where we feel like we're not making progress towards the goals and the growth that we set out to accomplish and to maximize and to realize. And we have to remember this axiom that the seeds that you plant determine the fruit that you grow. The seeds you plant determine the fruit that you grow. And you have to make sure that you're planting the right seeds on a daily and weekly and monthly basis to make sure that you're growing the right things in your life that lead towards the outcomes that you desire. It could happen with your plans. As you think about what your plans are, and you may have definite plans for today, this week, the rest of your life, but God may have other plans for you, and being open to what those plans are is very, very important. And I've definitely learned that in my own life. So I think it's important to think about, what am I holding on to today? And am I willing to hold on to that loosely no matter what happens? Yes, go for that. Yes, invest in what those are and be confident in the direction of your plans and take steps and plan goals and all of those things. Be engaged and be present in life, but be willing to hold on to those loosely, because when those things are taken away, or maybe they go in a different direction, then your identity is not tied up into that. It's tied up into a broader purpose and a broader plan. The second key to being outcome driven and process focused is to consistently focus on the process. And I think a lot of times we can get obsessed with the outcome or the goal. We've got to obsess about that, and we've got to make this, we want to accomplish whatever that might be, but we don't focus enough on the process to get there. And we work with our athletes all the time to focus on whatever those process-oriented things are that are going to help us accomplish our goal. And again, with the Seven Lakes High School soccer team, they were focused on the process. They were focused on the details that would allow them to score goals in game, that would allow them to win games. And then they were able to take care of playoff games at each level to then accomplish the ultimate goal, which was winning the state championship. And we have to consistently focus on the process to get to the outcomes that we want, and not just obsess about, what that outcome is. And I think it's really important that we balance that positive and constructive feedback. And in our workshops and in our training that we do on the invisible hand of leadership, we talk about giving positive and effective and constructive feedback. And a lot of times I've seen leaders, really bad leaders, just focus on criticizing and tearing down and at best giving constructive feedback. But we can't be constantly criticizing the people that we lead. We've got to make sure that the feedback we give is constructive, and we need to balance that with the positive feedback that we get as well. It at least needs to hit a ratio of 3-to-1 in terms of positive feedback to constructive feedback. And some of the research we've seen takes that level up to 5-to-1 or 8-to-1 as far as positive feedback to constructive feedback. So it's important that we realize that, and as we balance that, we give positive feedback that's real, that's timely, that's authentic, and make sure that we reinforce those things that they're doing well and their strengths and what we see in them, but also keeping them accountable to that potential to be, and giving constructive feedback that they can do something with if it's an area that they need to improve in, but always in the context of helping them realize their potential to be. He also focused on the process, possession by possession. And there were some key things that Steve Kerr talked about that they focused on as a team in preparation for the game, but also during the game. And there was 3 specific things that Steve Kerr outlined. One of them was, not focusing on the outcome. And we talk about that all the time, being outcome driven, but focusing on the process and how you've got to be process focused. And you might be thinking, well, how could they not think about the outcome? I mean, it's game 7. They've got to win. They've got to focus on winning, and winning, that has to be in their mind constantly. But he didn't want them to focus on the outcome. He wanted to focus on the process, possession by possession and moment by moment. And I think that's so important in our own lives. When we're focused on a goal, we want to obsess about the goal. We want to say, we've got to get this goal. Why haven't we gotten this goal? I'm mad that I haven't gotten the goal. But you have to focus on the process to get to the outcome that you want. And they were clearly focused on that. And they wanted to have what Steve Kerr called clean possessions, not turning the ball over, just focusing on being your best kind of moment by moment in the game. And from a day by day, week by week basis, we have to do that. And so as you think about this week, I want you to think about what are those process oriented things that you can focus on that allow you to accomplish that goal. Today, I wanted to talk to you about your performance in sports, business, and life. And specifically, are you allowing distractions to destroy your best performance? Are you allowing distractions to get in the way? I think a lot of times we can allow frustration or circumstances or any type of distraction to get in the way of our best performance. And we have an axiom that we talk about with our athletes that performance equals potential or talent minus distractions. So performance, your best performance equals the zone that you're maximizing your performance, when you're playing to your strengths, when you're maximizing your talent, and then minimizing the distractions. That's how you're going to get the best performance. And I want to deal with that distractions piece because I think a lot of times that gets in the way of our best performance, whether it be in a basketball game or whether it be in a client meeting or just at home. We can allow distractions and challenging circumstances to get in the way of our best performance. And sometimes it's not just negative things. It could be good things. We overthink things. We think about things that we could do or great visions and dreams and goals that we have for ourselves, and we don't focus on being present and executing and focusing on the things that are right in front of us. And so I think a lot of times either our competitor or the enemy tries to get in the way of our impact and giving our best by throwing a bunch of distractions our way. And I want to give you 3 steps to kind of focus on distractions and how you can minimize distractions getting in the way and of your best performance, whether it be in game or between games or between client meetings. So think about this. I think you need to identify what is the distraction. That's the first step. It's identifying the distraction. What are those 1 to 2 or 3 things that get in the way of you getting your best performance in a playoff game or in a client meeting, something like that? So when you think about that, it could be a referee's call. Maybe that gets in the way of, causing you to be frustrated and gets in the way of you giving your best. Maybe it's what the other team is doing. Maybe it's somebody that you're working with right now that every time they say this thing, it triggers something for you, and then you get distracted or frustrated and then are not able to focus on what's going on. So the first step is really important. You've got to identify what are those 2 to 3 things that get in the way of your best performance. Identify the distraction. The second thing is thinking about what your response is in that moment. I think we have to document what that response is and say, well, when this thing happens, this is what my normal response has been. And I'm not happy about that, but that's how I respond. Again, going back to a referee's call, if you think it's a bad call and you tend to get down and then take plays off, well, that's been your normal response. So you have to document what that is. And then the third thing is choosing a better response, So if this has been your typical response and it's not leading you to your best performance, then you've got to choose a better response. So in those moments when that distraction happens, what's a better response? And it's much better to do that outside of the frustrating moment and prepare in advance for what your response is going to be than in that moment just thinking, man, I hate feeling like this and I hate responding like this, but I don't know what to do. So we work a lot with our athletes and the business leaders that we coach to think about those moments and to think about a better response in those moments. And then they practice those, not only in practice and preparation for whatever they're getting ready to do, but in the moment they think about, okay, right now I'm thinking about this and I want to respond this way, but I'm going to choose a better response and I'm going to choose to focus on the next play. I'm going to choose to focus on how I can respond with grace in this moment towards a person maybe who said something towards me. So those are 3 steps that will allow you to move past the distractions in your life and give your best performance. And I think it's really important that we think about, that 3-step process and how we do not want to let distractions get in the way of giving our best, but we want to focus on the best response that we can give. And a lot of times it's identifying those situations that tend to draw us down and then focus on how we can choose a better response to be present in the moment and to give our best. And as always, we focus on giving our best in that moment and making the most of the moments in our life. Make it a great week and focus on choosing a better response to distractions that will come your way this week. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the most important question that you can answer, and especially as it relates to goal achievement or maximizing your potential or pursuing things that are worthwhile in sports, business, or life. And I think a lot of times when we think about goals, we know what we're trying to accomplish. We know where we're supposed to be doing something. We know when we're supposed to be doing it. At least we hope we do. And we know the answers to those questions. And sometimes those questions are the easier questions to answer. It's easy sometimes to come up with a goal. But this question is so important as far as accomplishing that goal and finishing the job and finishing the race that we're after. And the question is why? And I think knowing your why is so important when you're trying to achieve a goal or when you're going through life and knowing your purpose and knowing your calling. And I want to give you 3 reasons why knowing why you're doing something is so important. And the first one is that knowing your why gives you endurance for the journey or for the race. It's important to get started. I've run marathons and mile 1 is easy. Everybody's kind of there. You've got energy and there's fans and other people and watching the marathon during the race. So that gives you encouragement as well. But you need endurance to get through 26.2 miles. And what you're going through right now or the goal that you want to achieve, or maybe you're trying to get to the college level and play college sports or play pro sports, or maybe you have a goal to get promoted or have a great client meeting or great project that you're working on, and that requires endurance. And knowing why you're doing something gives you endurance for the journey, and we definitely need that in life as we go through the race of life and knowing our purpose and creating moments that matter for other people and for us as far as what we're trying to accomplish. So it gives us endurance for the journey. Knowing your why also gives you strength when things get hard or get tough. I know in just training for a marathon, there's some tough workouts, and I know they're on my schedule on that Tuesday, and I'm sometimes looking forward to that, but sometimes I'm dreading it, like, how can I get through it, or am I ready for it? And I think we all ask those questions, but when things get hard, when things get tough, knowing our why gives us strength to get through that workout or get through that conversation, the difficult conversation we need to have with somebody to build a stronger relationship, or working through a tough problem at work. Knowing our why can help us to solve that problem and then again, create a project that matters for a specific client that we're working for. So knowing our why gives us strength when things get hard and get tough, and they will if we're trying to accomplish anything that's meaningful. And then the third thing is that it sustains us. Knowing our why sustains us during setbacks. And we will have setbacks in life. We're not prophesying those setbacks, and we don't want to project those onto you. Hopefully things go smooth in your journey. But when you have setbacks, when there's an injury, when there's a resistance to something you're trying to do, knowing your why sustains you to get through that. I love what Jesus said in John 16:33. He said, I've told you these things that you'll have hope, that in this world, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have major league trouble in your lives, but take heart, take courage, he says. Basically, that's what that word means, to take courage. I've overcome the world. And I think it's important, I know in my own life that verse means a lot to me, that knowing that I have somebody who has overcome the world, who's giving me strength in that and sustains me during setbacks in life, that I know that I can go through anything with that power and that strength. So I just want to offer that up to you today. And I think it's important as you think about your goal. Maybe you're in the middle of that. Maybe you're thinking about specific goals that you're trying to accomplish right now. But answer that question of why, not just the what and the when, the where, some of the things that are logistics around that or what you're trying to accomplish. But why are you trying to do this? Why are you doing it? And if you haven't answered that question about a goal, going deeper into that question can help you have motivation and inspiration about what you're trying to accomplish. And as always, we want to make the most of the moments in our life. The fourth thing underneath being a leader is launching them. So you want to show, teach, build, and then launch them into the next stage of life. And this is where they take ownership of the things that you've been trying to teach them, communicate to them, and build them as leaders. Allow them to do that. You know, I've heard the quote, you know, we never stop parenting, but there's things that we do that we don't want to keep micromanaging certain things, and they have to own at some point in their life, whatever stage that they're at. And so the launching piece sometimes is the hardest piece for us, but they have to make those decisions on their own. And along the way, you've got to build into them those skills and those techniques and those principles that are going to allow them to launch into the next stage of life, whatever that might look like, whether it's school or, you know, college or adulthood. And so launching, that launch phase of leadership is so important. And that's when we let go and then provide counsel and advice when necessary and needed along the way, and allowing them to ask us those questions as we launch them into the next stage of life. So those are some reasons to actually create capacity in our lives, to rest, to recharge, to reflect, and to refocus. But here's how to do that. Here's a couple of ways that I found that work for me and how to do that. And one way is in your daily and weekly schedule. So creating capacity in your daily and weekly schedule. Are you the type of person that fills up your schedule with so many things and it's a full day, but it's not a fulfilling day? And we want to make sure that we're not just living a very full life. We want to make sure that we're living a fulfilling life and that we're making the right kind of impact in everything that we take on. And it's so easy today in this hybrid kind of work world that we live in, where we're present in meetings physically, but also virtually, that we just pack our day with stuff, but we never get anything accomplished. And so make sure as you approach this week and your days in this week that you're creating capacity in your daily and weekly schedule to do those things that are most important. You may just create time to think about strategy, or to rest, or to take a walk, or to refocus on certain things. Schedule that into your day and make sure that you don't have just a jam-packed day going on, but you have capacity in your daily and weekly schedule. It's really important too that you may not fill every single second of this week with things that you're supposed to do, because there may be things that come up that you need to take on, and creating that capacity in your daily or weekly schedule, you can actually take on those new things or those new roles, or that emergency comes up, or the time that a friend needs to talk to you about something, but you have capacity in your daily and weekly schedule to do that. Another way that I wrote down is in your life, to create capacity in your life. And this really has to deal with the roles that you take on. Have you taken on too many roles? Do you need to say no to some things and yes to certain things as well? And this time of year is a good time to take stock and kind of, what have I said yes to, and what do I need to say no to? And maybe there's certain roles that it's just not the best time of life to really embrace that role and to engage in that role. And so think about that. And if somebody asks you to take on something new, maybe you need to say no to that so you can say yes to the most important roles that you play in life. But in your life, you need to create capacity. And it doesn't mean that you need to be all things to all people, but be the best version of yourself to the people who need you most. Today, I wanted to talk to you about two characteristics that are essential for you having your best performance, whether it be in sports, business, or life. And those two characteristics are joy and focus. This summer, I've been spending a lot of time talking to a lot of different groups, business leaders, student athletes, teams, and coaches as well. And even in my coaching with athletes and business leaders as well at the high school, college, and professional level, we talk about these characteristics a lot. And regarding joy, I think a lot of times people can lose their joy because the profession becomes a job or just a job, and they lose joy of why they first began that profession. Or they start holding on to it so tightly, and maybe there's a challenge or something like that, and they start gripping really tightly on certain things, and they're not free to enjoy the thing that they love the most and the thing that they've blessed with talents and gifts to actually play or do. And so having joy and not losing our joy is really important, and enjoying what we do every day and enjoying that process. Regarding focus, I think sometimes we tend to focus on what's not, or forget what's most important, and not focus on the things that are most important priorities in our lives. And we can lose focus that way. Or we focus on the wrong things, and those things and thoughts become distractions to us and just provide noise and get in the way of us having our best performance. So today, in this week, I just want to encourage you to think about, are you loving what you're doing and regaining that joy? One of the ways that you can do that is just being grateful and having a spirit of gratitude for what you get to do every day, the gifts, the talents, and strengths that you have, the opportunities that you have to display those gifts. And when you do that, you can really play from a place of joy every day, and not anger or hate or bitterness or whatever that emotion might be, but to play from a true spirit of joy, and to lead from a spirit of joy as well. Being grateful is key to that. And regarding focus, I want to challenge you and encourage you to think about, what are the most positive and productive thoughts that I can have this week that will allow me to focus on the right things and put me in the best position to have success. Joy and focus, that's essential for you to have your best performance. Enjoy what you do and focus on the right things to set yourself and others up for success. Is this idea of playing from acceptance and not for acceptance. Play from a place of acceptance, not for acceptance. And I think so many times I see people in sports, business, and life seeking validation and seeking acceptance, and they're, quote, playing for acceptance. And they want to seek out that validation, and that's how they derive confidence. And we believe that that's the wrong way to develop confidence, that you're trying to do it from an outside-in approach. And it looks like this. It's really based on a statement of if-then. If I do well, then I'll feel good about myself. And we tie it straight to our identity. If I make this shot, then I'll feel good about myself. If I make this pass, then I'll feel good about myself. If I accomplish my goals, then I'll feel good about myself. And you're relying on an outside force or an outside kind of outcome that you may not have control over, especially if you're playing in a team sport, or if you're doing things where shots not falling that day. There's certain process-oriented things you can do. But when we base our true identity and the core of who we are on an outcome, then we're going to be disappointed at some point. And we can't seek out that acceptance from outside sources. As we continue that series, I want to talk about the second key to building a championship mindset, and that's focusing on what you can control. We often tell our athletes, focus on what you can control. You've probably heard that from a coach if you're an athlete, or a business leader as well who's guiding your team, and they talk about focusing on what you can control. And a lot of times people talk about energy, effort, attitude, communication, and those are all things that we can focus on, and those are things within our sphere of control and influence. And it's so important that we do that, because a lot of times I see people getting distracted by things that they can't control. The referee's call, somebody else's attitude, what the competition is doing, what the weather's like, the circumstances of the game. And those are things we can't control, but we can influence those if we focus on what we can control. And there are two axioms that we use in working with our athletes related to focusing on what you can control. And I want to share those with you today and help you apply those this week. And the first one is, what you choose to focus on magnifies in size. What you choose to focus on magnifies in size. And every word in there is very important because we have a choice. It's not what you focus on magnifies in size. It's what you choose to focus on that magnifies in size. And when we know we have a choice about what we focus on, we can direct our mind and our attention to those things that we can focus on. When we choose to focus on distractions, and I use this all the time with my golfers, the golf course designers get you to focus on the distractions, the sand, the trees, the water, and they design those in interesting places on the hole. And when we focus on the sand or we focus on the water, that becomes bigger and bigger in our minds. And when we focus on our target, though, that can become bigger and bigger in our minds. It doesn't guarantee success, but puts our mindset in a better position to have success. And so we can't magnify those distractions in our lives and the things that we can't control. We can choose to focus on the right things, and those will magnify in our mind. The goal, the process to get to the goal, those are all things that we can choose to focus on that will help us and put us in a better position to have success. So that third key to building a championship mindset is to be outcome driven and process focused. What does that mean? Well, we want to make sure that you have that determination around your goals. And so to be driven by that outcome. And it could be a larger goal or a larger outcome like winning the district championship or playing college basketball or whatever that goal might be. But it could be something small. It could be, I've got to make these free throws at the end of a game, and they're pressure free throws, and I want to make my free throws, and that's the outcome that you're driven by. But you can't just constantly focus on, man, I've got to make those, because a lot of times that leads to a desperate state, and it causes us to tense up mentally and tense up physically as well. I see this in a lot of my golfers because we could have an educated discussion about what score is going to win the game or win the day at the end of the day and win that match. But you can't just be thinking about that score throughout the match, because that's going to cause you again to tense up, to put more pressure on certain shots as well. And so we want to be outcome driven, but once we've set what the goal is, we've got to be process focused. And that's so important, to focus on process oriented things that are going to allow us to achieve the outcome that we want. The first way to build an I will mindset and to develop that I will mindset is to nurture perspective. Nurture perspective. And I think it's important that we have a proper perspective, because a lot of times we put so much pressure and so much emphasis on one play or one shot in a game. And when that doesn't happen perfectly, or we don't get the outcome that we want, we're disappointed, our expectations fall. Sometimes we feel like a failure. We may not admit that, but subconsciously we're going through all of those emotions in our mind. And we have to develop a perspective and nurture that perspective about the law of averages. You know, I've mentioned this example many times on the podcast when I go speak, but you think about Steph Curry being the greatest shooter ever, probably. And his lifetime shooting percentage is probably somewhere in the 50 to 60%. But a lot of times I've seen him go through games where he's 0 for 6 in the first half or first quarter or something like that. And he doesn't start well. But then he goes 6 for 6 the rest of the game. And at the end of the day, he hits his average. But at a point in time, he was 0 for whatever in the game. And he didn't have an I'll try mindset or I just can't tonight mindset. He continued to believe, and shot by shot, he said, I will make this shot. And I think it's the same perspective we have to have in sports and also in life, that every shot's not going to be perfect. Every day is not going to be perfect. But in each moment that we have that I will mindset, and we nurture perspective, that when that doesn't work out the way we expected it to, we go back into the next moment with an I will mindset, whether that be the next day, the next hour, the next minute, and making sure that we're having that proper perspective, that we know everything's not going to be perfect, but we know that we can have an I will mindset and a perspective that is different than just feeling like a failure in that moment. And the fifth key to building a championship mindset is improve your recovery time. Improve your recovery time. And I explain this usually in the first session in coaching an athlete, and also when we're talking to teams and coaches. And we first have to define, well, what is recovery time? And we define it this way. Recovery time is how long does it take you to get from a moment you didn't expect to have happen into the next moment. It's that next play mentality. It's being present. A lot of times we get distracted by the previous moment. And a lot of times those are bad moments that distract us and keep us from being fully present in this moment to performing at our best. And we have to make sure that we can build that recovery time. We didn't expect this moment to happen. It could be a referee's call. It could be the weather. It could be what the other team is doing, the fans, but we can't get distracted by that. And we have to build and work on improving our recovery time to recover from that moment to be present in the next moment. And this is applicable no matter what age you are. I think a lot of times when we're earlier in the seasons of our life, we think we have all the time in our world, and discovering our purpose and calling is for our later years or our senior years or the mid 40s or whatever that might be for you. But we don't think about it early enough. And I think it's really important if we want to make our lives count for what matters most. And then I think also I talked to a lot of older adults where you were thinking about, the later years of life and thinking, well, our lives have passed us by, or we already know what our purpose is, but we don't see meaning in some of the things that God wants to call us to in later years in life as well. And it's important, no matter what stage we are in life, that we define what our purpose is and that we walk into that day by day and moment by moment. I have a great mentor, and I've quoted him many times. He's been a lifelong friend, and he talks about purpose and calling, and he talks about life. And his quote is that life is a series of assignments that gives clarity to our calling along the way. And I love that quote. He was helping me at a transition point in my life to really define what was next. And not that my purpose had shifted, but the next season of life, the stages of that, and the series of assignments that I was actually going to do and that I hadn't discovered yet, but that God was revealing to me in my life. He helped bring clarity to that by that quote, to say that, it's a series of assignments and it'll bring clarity to your calling more and more into view as you start to look at these assignments, both in the rearview mirror, as well as, as you look towards them and forward to them as well, and to anticipate great opportunity in those moments. The ancient Greeks talked about this word arete, which stands for excellence. And that's one of the meanings of arete. And they defined excellence, or this word arete as they used it, as fulfilling the purpose for which you were created. And so it's really important when we think about living our lives with excellence, we're just thinking about fulfilling the purpose for which we were created. And if you want to be your best and give your best and have excellence in anything that you do, it's getting back to purpose. That's why when we talk about the burning why that you have, that's going to propel you in those moments where you're distracted by things or where things are challenging and you're trying to attain a certain goal. You go back to your why, or you go back to your purpose. And that's how you give excellence in your life. But we talked about it during this interview about these two keys to fulfilling and living out your purpose. And I want to share those with you today. And I want you to be thinking about what they mean to you and how you can apply them. And the two keys were being available and faithful. Being available and faithful. I think a lot of times when we think about, fulfilling our purpose, and in the conversation I had with him, we think about success, achieving Emmys for him or doing the show with excellence. And yes, he wants to do that. He's grateful for the Emmys that he's had, but that's not what life is all about. And in my own life, I think, trying to equate purpose and meaning and identity to what the world says is successful is fading, because even when you accomplish those glories, they're going to pass away. And you want to focus on things that are eternal and that have meaning and that matter most. And it provides incentive when things get challenging and tough. I know in just training for a marathon, I wanted to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And that was my why. It wasn't a overriding, big purpose why, but it was a why for that moment and what I wanted to do. And so when I had to do those hard speed workouts in the middle of summer in Houston, and kind of just slogging through that and dealing with the humidity and the intense heat and things like that, I remembered my why, knowing that what I did today was going to benefit me to being able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And when I reminded myself of the why, it helped me get through those challenges and those tough circumstances. And you may be building a business, you may be launching a family, you may be doing all kinds of things in your life that are so, so important, and you're dealing with challenging and tough moments right now. But the why and reminding yourself of the why can get you through those tough days and those challenging days, because you come back to, why am I doing this? And it reminds you of that, and then helps to give you perseverance and resiliency in those challenging circumstances that you may be facing right now. But we have to engage in the moment, and that means bringing our best to the moment. It means being fully present, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And every day as we get up, when we have a purpose and we're connecting to that, we're going to bring our best to the moments, and we're going to engage in what those opportunities are. Again, leading our team well, encouraging others, having those great conversations and offering wisdom to other people, engaging with what God is wanting to do in our own lives, because that's important. That's where it starts. And that's where we get our purpose. And that's where he wants to tell us his plans for our lives as well. And so engaging in those moments is really key. But if we don't have a purpose in our lives, then we're not going to fully engage, and life is going to become transactional at best. And we want it to be transformational. When you think about purpose, do you have, because we've talked about this, and I've talked about this in a lot of groups, a written purpose statement or something you've jotted down? Have you ever thought about that? A personal mission statement? Have you articulated that to where you've kind of written that down and you kind of live by that?
Yeah, I feel like my purpose statement, I appreciate you asking that, because I don't think I have a consistent phrasing for it. And I think I want to, now that you mentioned that. I think there's a lot of power in that. My purpose seems to land back on being an honest expression of stepping into the fullness of who God has created me to be.
I do a lot of work with athletes on sports
Yes.
psychology and sports performance. And one of the principles that we talk about is being outcome driven and process focused. And I'm going to go back to what you said, but in that, the people that I work with, I mean, they have big goals and they're outcome driven, but what the challenge is sometimes get them to be process focused and to really dive into that. And what you said, when you came to Nashville, it wasn't like, I want to get a record deal or I want to get this or whatever. You said things that were process oriented. You said, I want to build my musicianship, grow that and get better at that, and grow community.
Yeah.
And then you broke that down into some more process oriented things about how you were going to do that. But it had nothing to do with the record deal or the song thing or the thing the gig you're doing now with For King and Country, which I want to talk about as well.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
that is so cool because you were trusting God in the process and being faithful with that. And he blessed that even more than you could imagine. That's just so good.
That's beautiful
And
framing. I appreciate you saying it that way.
yeah. And that's encouraging, I think, to people who are
Mhm.
pursuing goals, because I see some people all the time that got to make the sale or got to do this or want to do that. And being present in the moment and being present in the process is really important. So,
It's so good.
and he defines greatness as selfless exceptionalism. And I want to dive into that definition today. But in thinking about greatness, one of the questions he posed that day was, what trophy do you want to hold? And as you think about this week, what is that goal that you're trying to achieve? Or what is that actual trophy that you're pursuing in life? What is your purpose? Maybe it's just being the best you can be in certain tasks this week. But whatever that is, in visualizing that, defining greatness and pursuing that's really important. If you think about those words, selfless and exceptionalism, let's talk about exceptionalism first, because that's what he did that day and then came back to the word selfless. I think when we use the word exceptionalism, it talks about being exceptional. That's in the core of the word. And being exceptional is being your best, being the best that you can be. And whatever that is, in a task, in the role that you play, we want to be our best. Maybe it's at home, you want to be the best father or the best mother. Maybe it's at work, you want to be the best whatever you are in everything that you do. But sometimes we can go through the motions and we shrink back, and we may not verbalize it this way, but we're having an I'll try mindset instead of an I will mindset and being our best. And every day in everything we do, we need to strive to be our best. And so exceptionalism is all about being the best that you can be. It's really important to think about all the moments that happened over this past year and some of the key highlights that happened and what were some of the lessons learned from this past year. How did you grow? I think when we also think about lessons learned, we tend to think about negative things. When I talk about learning from the past and a lot of the talks I do, people often think about a past as a past moment that wasn't good. But we need to reflect on those things that were good and were accomplishments and that we're grateful for, and to learn from those moments. And every moment counts in developing the person who we're becoming each and every year. And so reflection is an important thing. And so, again, you don't have to make this process longer than it needs to be, but I think it's important that you write down some key reflections of highlights, things you're grateful for, people that you've made an impact in their lives, people who've made an impact in your life. What were some accomplishments you're most grateful for? What are some things that you've learned about yourself over this past year? And then what were some moments that maybe weren't your best, but you learned from and that you redirected in a certain way? And so reflection is really key. And I think as you think about this past year, take some time to reflect on the moments that mattered for you this year and helped you.